They called me a parasite. At my own company's anniversary gala, my son's wife stood in front of 300 executives and announced I was a clingy freeloader living off Daniel's success. The room went silent. My son, my only child, stood there frozen, saying nothing. Not one word in my defense. What Vanessa didn't know as she smiled her perfect smile was that I owned 51% of everything she was celebrating. Every marble floor, every crystal chandelier, every share of Carter Dynamics. I'd kept that secret for 5 years to protect my son. That night, watching him choose her over me, I realized my silence was killing him. So before you judge me for what I did next, let me tell you how a mother's love became a weapon. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. I wasn't supposed to be at the gala. Daniel had made that clear 3 weeks earlier when he'd stopped by my house. Not to visit, but to drop off papers for me to sign. Something about tax documents, he'd said vaguely, not meeting my eyes. He'd stood in my doorway for maybe 90 seconds, checking his phone twice, before mentioning the anniversary event. It's a corporate thing, Mom. Black tie. Very formal. I don't think it's really your scene. Your scene. As if I hadn't built the damn company whose anniversary he was celebrating. But I'd smiled and told him I understood. Because that's what I'd been doing for 5 years, smiling, understanding, stepping back. Honoring my husband Robert's dying wish that Daniel never know the truth about Carter Dynamics. That he earn his success without the weight of knowing he was working for his own inheritance. Let him become his own man. Robert had whispered that last night in the hospital, gripping my hand so hard it hurt. Don't tell him until he's ready. Promise me, Evelyn. I'd promised. And I'd kept that promise even as I watched my son drift further away, month by month, year by year. But something had shifted in the past 6 months. Daniel had become a stranger, cold, distant. The warmth that used to light up his face when he saw me had been replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like impatience. Our weekly dinners had become monthly phone calls, then sporadic texts, and Vanessa, his wife of 3 years. She'd always been polite to my face, all sugar and superficial compliments. But I'd caught the edge in her voice when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The way she'd redirect conversations when Daniel started talking about his childhood. How she'd invented reasons for them to skip family holidays. I should have seen it coming. The gala was being held at the Grand Meridian, the same hotel where Robert and I had celebrated our 20th anniversary. I'd put on the navy dress I saved for special occasions, nothing fancy, just something appropriate, and taken a cab, arriving deliberately late so I could slip in quietly. The ballroom was spectacular. Ice sculptures, 5-tier champagne fountains, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. The walls were lined with blown-up photographs documenting Carter Dynamics' 15-year history, photos that carefully started from year 3, after Robert and I had already done the brutal work of building the foundation. I recognized most of the faces in the crowd. Senior executives I'd personally hired, back when I was still actively involved. Board members who'd been sending me quarterly reports for years. None of them knew me. To them, I was just some elderly woman who'd wandered into the wrong event. I spotted Daniel almost immediately. He was standing near the front of the room with Vanessa, both of them surrounded by admirers. He looked good, successful, confident, wearing the Rolex I'd given him for his last birthday. Vanessa was stunning in a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her blonde hair swept up in some elaborate style. They looked perfect together, like they belonged in a magazine spread. I found a seat at one of the back tables, next to a couple I didn't recognize. They introduced themselves as something from accounting. I smiled and nodded, letting their conversation wash over me while I watched my son work the room. The speeches started around 8. James Morrison, the current CEO, a man I'd hired 7 years ago when he was just a promising mid-level manager, stood at the podium and talked about vision and innovation, about Carter Dynamics' incredible growth trajectory, about the leadership team that made it all possible. He praised Daniel specifically, called him the driving force behind our Asian market expansion, and a rising star in strategic development. The room applauded. Daniel stood, waving modestly, and Vanessa beamed beside him like she'd personally engineered his success. I felt something twist in my chest. Pride, yes, but also a deep, aching sadness. Then Morrison said something that made my hands go still on my champagne glass. and we're especially excited about the future. Daniel Carter has been working closely with our consulting partner Adrian Cross on an ambitious new expansion initiative that could triple our international footprint in the next 18 months. Adrian Cross. The name hit me like cold water. I knew that name. I'd seen it in the quarterly reports I reviewed religiously. Adrian Cross was a business consultant with an impressive resume and a reputation for aggressive growth strategies. He'd been brought in 6 months ago, right around the time Daniel had started becoming distant. I'd flagged his involvement in my notes to the board. Suggested they do more thorough due diligence, but as a silent investor, I couldn't push too hard without raising questions about why I cared so much. The speeches continued. More champagne flowed. Dinner was served, some elaborate multi-course thing I barely tasted. I was getting ready to leave, to slip out as quietly as I had arrived, when Vanessa's voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife. "Oh, Daniel, isn't that your mother?" The words were loud. Too loud. Deliberately projected to carry across multiple tables. I looked up to find her staring directly at me, one perfectly manicured hand on Daniel's arm. Her expression was all artificial surprise, but her eyes were hard. Daniel followed her gaze. For a second, just a split second, something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or embarrassment. "Mom." He walked over, Vanessa gliding beside him like a shark. "I didn't know you were coming." "I wanted to support you," I said quietly, standing to meet them. "You've worked so hard." "How sweet," Vanessa said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Though I have to admit, I'm surprised you could afford a ticket. These tables are $10,000 each." The nearby conversation stuttered to a halt. "I managed," I said evenly. "Did you really?" Vanessa tilted her head, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Because Daniel mentioned you've been having some financial difficulties. Something about property taxes?" My stomach dropped. I'd mentioned to Daniel, in confidence during one of our rare phone calls, that I was considering some updates to the house. He'd misunderstood, or maybe Vanessa had twisted it into something else entirely. "I'm fine," I said. "Are you, though?" Vanessa's voice grew louder. People at the surrounding tables were openly watching now. "I mean, it must be hard, living alone in that big old house, no income of your own. It's fortunate Daniel is so successful now, otherwise—" "Vanessa," Daniel said uncomfortably. "Not here." But she wasn't stopping. "I'm just saying, at a certain point, don't you think it becomes a burden? Constantly needing support from your children? Some people would call that being a—" She paused delicately. "Parasite." The word hung in the air like poison. I couldn't breathe. Around us, I could see executives exchanging glances. Someone coughed. The string quartet had stopped playing. "That's enough," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is it?" Vanessa's eyes glittered. "Because from where I'm standing, you've been living off Robert's memory for years. And now that he's gone, you're clinging to Daniel because you have nothing else. No career, no accomplishments of your own. Just a sad, lonely woman who can't accept that her son has moved on." I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to say something. Anything. He stood there, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't find words. "Daniel," I said softly. "Please." He looked away. That's when something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet snap, like a thread finally giving way under too much weight. I picked up my purse with steady hands. "You're right, Vanessa," I said, my voice clearer now. "I should go. This isn't my scene." I walked out of that ballroom with my head up, ignoring the whispers that followed me like wasps. I made it all the way to the lobby before the tears came. I sat on a marble bench near the entrance and cried quietly into my hands, feeling every one of my 63 years. My phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "I'm sorry about that." Vanessa didn't mean it the way it sounded. "Let's talk next week?" Didn't mean it, as if cruelty could be accidental. I typed back, "Of course," then deleted it and wrote, "Okay." But I didn't send it. Instead, I sat there staring at those 3 letters, thinking about Robert, about the promise I'd made him, about the 5 years I'd spent being invisible, believing I was protecting our son. What if I'd been wrong? What if my silence hadn't made Daniel stronger? It had made him weak. I pulled up another contact in my phone. Marcus Webb, my attorney and one of the few people who knew the truth about my ownership stake in Carter Dynamics. We need to meet. Tomorrow morning. It's time. His response came within seconds. Finally. I'll have the files ready. I took a cab home to the house Robert and I had bought 34 years ago, when Carter Dynamics was just an idea scribbled on napkins at our kitchen table. The same house where Daniel had grown up, where we'd celebrated every birthday and Christmas, where Robert had died in our bedroom with both of us holding his hands. The house Vanessa thought I was struggling to maintain. The house she had no idea I owned outright, along with 3 rental properties and an investment portfolio worth $8 million. I poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely did, and sat in Robert's old study. His books still lined the shelves. His reading glasses sat on the desk, exactly where he'd left them. I kept my promise, I said to the empty room. I tried to do it your way. But Bobby, she's destroying him, and I can't watch anymore. The silence answered back. I spent that night going through old files, documents from Carter Dynamics founding, investment records, corporate structure agreements, the shareholder certificates that proved beyond any doubt that I owned 51% of the company. Robert and I had started Carter Dynamics in our garage 28 years ago. We'd maxed out credit cards, mortgaged the house, worked 18-hour days for years. Robert handled the technical side. He was a genius with software development. I managed operations, finance, client relations, everything that kept the lights on, while he built the products that made us successful. When Daniel was born, I'd stepped back from the day-to-day operations but remained the majority shareholder. Robert became the public face of the company while I worked behind the scenes, making the decisions that mattered. We'd been partners in everything. After Robert died, I'd honored his wish by staying completely silent. I'd let Daniel believe he was working for a company his father had built alone. Let him climb the corporate ladder, thinking he was earning it through pure merit, not nepotism. But somewhere along the way, Daniel had started believing a different story. One where his mother was just a housewife who'd been lucky enough to marry a successful man. Where I'd contributed nothing, built nothing, deserved nothing. And Vanessa had fed that story like gasoline on a fire. The next morning, Marcus arrived at my house at 8 sharp, carrying 2 briefcases full of documents. "You're sure about this?" he asked, spreading papers across my dining room table. "Once you reveal yourself, there's no going back." "I'm sure." "Evelyn, I have to ask, what changed?" I thought about Daniel's face last night, the way he'd looked away when I needed him most. I realized I was saving him from the wrong thing, I said. I thought I was protecting him from privilege. Turns out I was protecting him from responsibility. Marcus nodded slowly. "All right then. Let's talk strategy." We spent 4 hours going through everything: corporate bylaws, shareholder rights, the upcoming board meeting where Daniel was scheduled to present Adrian Cross's expansion proposal. "I've been doing some digging on Cross," Marcus said, pulling out another file. "His track record isn't as clean as he claims. 3 of his last 5 consulting projects ended in disaster. One company went bankrupt. Another is facing federal investigation for securities fraud. Can you prove he knew about the problems?" "Not yet. But I've got a forensic accountant friend who owes me a favor. Give me 2 weeks." "We might not have 2 weeks. Daniel's presenting at the next board meeting." Marcus frowned. "Then we need to stop that presentation from happening." "No." An idea was forming. "Let it happen, but I want to be there." "Evelyn, as an investor, someone interested in the expansion proposal, can you make that happen without revealing who I am?" Marcus's eyes widened as he understood. "You want to challenge him publicly." "I want to see what he's actually proposing, and I want him to defend it on its merits, not on the fact that he's Robert Carter's son. That's risky. If he recognizes you, he won't." I pulled out an old photograph from 15 years ago, back when I attended board meetings regularly. I looked different then. Darker hair, 40 pounds heavier. I wore reading glasses. Daniel was 13. He barely paid attention to what I did. Marcus studied the photo, then looked at me. "You've thought this through." "I've had 5 years to think." Over the next 2 weeks, I transformed myself. Not into someone else, into who I used to be. I colored my hair back to its original dark brown, got contact lenses, bought expensive business suits in the style I'd worn when I ran operations at Carter Dynamics. I became Margaret Vale, my maiden name, the one that still appeared on all my legal documents. Marcus arranged for Ms. Vale to attend the board meeting as a potential major investor interested in Carter Dynamics expansion plans. He'd hinted to James Morrison that I represented a consortium of private investors with deep pockets. The board meeting was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon at 3. I arrived at 2:30, walking into the building I'd helped design, past the reception desk I'd selected, through hallways whose layout I'd approved. Nobody recognized me. To them, I was just another business consultant in an expensive suit. The boardroom was on the executive floor, glass walls overlooking the city, a long marble table that could seat 20. When I walked in, 8 people were already there, including James Morrison and 3 other executives I recognized. Daniel wasn't there yet. Ms. Vale, Morrison stood extending his hand. Thank you for coming. We're excited about your interest in Carter Dynamics. The pleasure is mine, I said, keeping my voice slightly lower, more formal than my natural tone. Your growth trajectory is impressive. We made small talk while we waited. I learned that 2 board members were out of town, attending a conference, that the expansion proposal had been fast-tracked at Adrian Cross's urging, that there was some internal resistance, but Daniel had been very persuasive about its potential. At 2:55, the door opened and Daniel walked in with Vanessa. I hadn't expected her to be there. She was dressed like she was attending a shareholders meeting, not sitting in on one. Designer suit, impossible heels, her hair and makeup perfect. She took a seat right next to where Daniel would sit, as if she had every right to be there. Daniel looked confident, polished. He was carrying a presentation folder and a tablet, already pulling up slides. He glanced around the table, his eyes passing over me without a flicker of recognition. My son looked directly at me and saw a stranger. Morrison called the meeting to order at 3 sharp. Before we begin with the expansion proposal, he said, I'd like to introduce Margaret Vale. Ms. Vale represents a group of investors who've expressed significant interest in Carter Dynamics. She's here to observe and potentially participate in future funding rounds. Daniel smiled at me. Welcome, Ms. Vale. I think you'll be impressed by what we've put together. I'm sure I will be, I said carefully. The presentation started, and within 5 minutes, I felt my blood run cold. Adrian Cross's expansion proposal was a disaster wrapped in attractive packaging. Daniel presented it with confidence, clicking through slides full of projected revenue growth, market penetration statistics, and partnership opportunities in Southeast Asia. But the numbers didn't make sense. The timeline was impossibly aggressive. The capital requirements were vastly understated. The risk assessment was practically non-existent. And the guaranteed returns were based on market conditions that hadn't existed in a decade. I'd seen proposals like this before, usually right before a company went bankrupt. Daniel finished his presentation to polite applause. Vanessa was beaming like he'd just won an Oscar. Questions? Morrison asked. I raised my hand. Ms. Vale? Several, I said, opening my own tablet where I'd been taking notes. Let's start with the projected market penetration in Vietnam. You're estimating 22% market share within 18 months. What's that based on? Daniel didn't hesitate. Our consulting partner Adrian Cross has extensive experience in Southeast Asian markets. These projections are based on comparable expansion case studies. Which case studies specifically? A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. I'd have to check with Adrian for the exact companies. You're asking this board to approve a $40 million expansion, and you don't know which case studies the projections are based on? Vanessa's smile had frozen. I'm sure Daniel can get you that information later. I prefer it now. I kept my voice pleasant but firm, because I've done some research on Mr. Cross's recent projects. TechBridge Solutions, Meridian Global, Summit Industries. Are those the case studies you're referencing? The room had gone very quiet. Daniel was looking at me more carefully now, like he was trying to figure out who I was. Those are 3 of Adrian's successful partnerships, yes, he said slowly. Successful? I pulled up my own tablet. TechBridge Solutions filed for bankruptcy protection 16 months after Cross's expansion proposal was implemented. Meridian Global is currently under federal investigation for securities fraud, and Summit Industries lost 67% of its market value after a failed international expansion that matches your proposal almost exactly. The silence was deafening. Morrison leaned forward. Ms. Vale, how did you— Public records, I said calmly. All of this is publicly available information, which makes me wonder why it wasn't included in the due diligence for this proposal. Daniel's face had gone from confident to pale. Those companies had other issues, management problems that had nothing to do with the expansion strategy. Did they? I clicked to another screen. Because looking at the timelines, the problems started within months of implementing Cross's recommendations. Aggressive overseas expansion funded by unsustainable debt, partnership deals with companies that had no real market presence, revenue projections based on best-case scenarios that had no historical basis. I looked directly at my son. This proposal will destroy Carter Dynamics, and I'm curious why nobody in this room caught that before today. Vanessa stood up abruptly. Who do you think you are? Daniel has worked on this for months. You walk in here for one meeting and think you can— I think I can read a balance sheet, I said, still calm. And this one doesn't balance. Morrison cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a break. Daniel, maybe you and Mr. Cross can address Miss Vale's concerns and we can reconvene. No. It was one of the other board members, Patricia Chen, a woman I'd hired 6 years ago. I want to hear this. Ms. Vale, you mentioned debt financing. The proposal calls for a mix of debt and equity. What specifically concerns you about the debt structure? And just like that, I wasn't some outsider asking rude questions anymore. I was an expert being consulted. I spent the next 40 minutes systematically dismantling Daniel's proposal. Not cruelly, I took no pleasure in it, but thoroughly. I showed them the hidden costs, the unrealistic timelines, the partnership deals with companies that existed only on paper, the revenue projections that assumed market conditions that no analyst was actually predicting. By the time I finished, Daniel looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Vanessa looked murderous. Morrison looked troubled. Daniel, I think we need to table this proposal pending a more thorough review. But Adrian said— Daniel started. I don't care what Adrian said, Patricia interrupted. Ms. Vale just showed us publicly available information that should have been in your due diligence. Either you didn't do the research, or you did it and chose to ignore red flags. Either way, that's a problem. Daniel stood there, visibly struggling. I could see him trying to process what had just happened, how his big moment had turned into a humiliation. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I didn't stop it, because this wasn't about punishment. This was about protection. The meeting adjourned awkwardly. Board members filed out, some stopping to shake my hand, others avoiding eye contact with Daniel. Morrison pulled me aside to ask if I'd be willing to consult on a revised proposal. I told him I'd consider it. When I turned to leave, Vanessa was blocking my path. That was quite a performance, she said, her voice low and poisonous. Did you enjoy embarrassing him? I prevented a disaster. There's a difference. Who are you really? Because I don't believe this investor story. Nobody cares this much about due diligence unless they have skin in the game. She was smarter than I'd given her credit for. I'm someone who knows a bad deal when I see one, I said. And I'm someone who doesn't like watching talented people get manipulated into making career-ending mistakes. Manipulated? Her eyes flashed. Daniel made his own decisions. Did he? Or did Adrian Cross make them for him? I walked past her before she could respond. In the elevator, my hands were shaking. I'd just publicly humiliated my own son, destroyed months of his work, made him look incompetent in front of the people he was trying to impress. But I'd also saved him from making a catastrophic mistake. I just didn't know if he'd ever forgive me for it. My phone buzzed as I reached the lobby. A text from Marcus. How did it go? Phase 1 complete, I typed back. Now comes the hard part, because I knew what would happen next. Vanessa would start digging. She'd investigate Margaret Vale. Eventually, she'd find the connection to me. And when she did, all hell would break loose. I drove home in a daze, replaying the meeting in my mind. Daniel's face when the board members started asking harder questions. The way Vanessa had looked at me like she wanted to burn me alive. The way my son had looked so lost. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the promise I'd made to Robert, about whether I was betraying it or finally honoring it the way it should have been honored. At 2 a.m, I went down to the study and pulled out the old photo albums, pictures of Daniel as a baby, as a toddler. The proud little boy who'd announced he wanted to work at Daddy's company when he grew up. The young man who'd hugged me so tight at Robert's funeral and promised we'd get through it together. Where had that person gone? My phone rang at 7 the next morning. Unknown number. Ms. Vale? A man's voice. Smooth, professional. This is Adrian Cross. I understand we had some miscommunication yesterday regarding the expansion proposal. I'd love to buy you coffee and clear up any confusion. There's no confusion, Mr. Cross. Your numbers don't work. I think if you understood the full context, I understand that 3 of your last 5 consulting projects ended in disaster. I understand that you've made a career out of convincing companies to take risks they can't afford. And I understand that you found a new mark in Daniel Carter. Silence on the other end. Then, who are you really? Someone who does research. You should try it. I hung up. 10 minutes later, Vanessa called. We need to talk, she said. No pretense of politeness now. About? About who you really are. About why you're so interested in destroying my husband's career. About what you want. I don't want anything except to see Carter Dynamics make smart business decisions. Bullshit. Her voice was sharp. Nobody goes to that much effort unless they have a personal stake. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Who are you? I could have lied. Should have lied. Instead, I said, I'm someone who's watched you manipulate my son for 3 years, and I'm done being quiet about it. The silence that followed was electric. Your son? Her voice had gone very soft, very dangerous. Figure it out, Vanessa. You're a smart woman. I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee with shaking hands, knowing I'd just lit a fuse I couldn't extinguish. The explosion was coming, and this time there would be no more hiding. The knock came at 9:30 that night. I'd been sitting in the dark, staring at nothing, when I heard it. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the quiet house like gunshots. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Daniel stood on my porch, still in his suit from the board meeting, but the tie was gone and his shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were red. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Margaret Vale, he said. His voice was flat, dead. That's your maiden name. I stepped back to let him in. He walked past me into the living room, the same room where he'd played with Lego as a child, where we'd watched movies on Friday nights, where Robert had taught him chess. When were you going to tell me? He turned to face me. Or were you just going to keep playing games? Keep humiliating me in front of my colleagues? I wasn't playing games. Then what do you call that performance today? His voice cracked. You destroyed me in that boardroom, made me look like an idiot in front of the entire board. Patricia Chen won't even look at me now. Morrison pulled me aside and suggested I take some time off to reassess my priorities. Daniel and Adrian, he's threatening to pull out of the consulting contract entirely because of your interference. Do you have any idea how that makes me look? I brought him in. I vouched for him. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. He called you. Of course he called me. To ask what the hell happened. To ask who this Margaret Vale person really is and why she has such a vendetta against him. And what did you tell him? Daniel ran his hands through his hair. I told him I'd handle it. That there must be some misunderstanding. Because I couldn't tell him the truth, could I? That Margaret Vale is my mother? That my own mother just sabotaged the biggest project of my career? The word sabotaged hit me like a slap. Is that what you think I did? What else would you call it? He was pacing now, angry energy radiating off him. You showed up pretending to be some investor, asked questions designed to make me look unprepared, threw around accusations about Adrian's past projects. Everything I said was true. It was taken out of context. Those companies had management issues that had nothing to do with Adrian's strategies. He explained all of this to me months ago when we started working together. He lied to you. How would you know? Daniel spun to face me. You don't know him. You don't know anything about this proposal except what you decided to dig up in some vindictive research project. Vindictive. The word hung between us. I was protecting you, I said quietly. From what? From success? From finally making a real impact at the company? His laugh was bitter. You know what I think? I think you can't stand seeing me succeed. I think you've been waiting for me to fail so you can keep playing the role of the supportive mother, the one person I have to rely on. That's not true, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, the timing is pretty convenient. I'm about to close the biggest deal of my career, and suddenly you decide to reveal yourself and tear it all down. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. The deal would have destroyed the company. Those numbers were fantasy, Daniel. The debt structure alone. You don't know that. You're making assumptions based on incomplete information. I'm making calculations based on 30 years of business experience. He stopped pacing. What 30 years? You were a housewife, Mom. Dad built Carter Dynamics. You supported him, sure, but you weren't actually running anything. The words punched the air from my lungs. Is that what you think? It's what I know. Dad was the genius, the visionary. He created something from nothing, and then he left it to people like me to carry on his legacy. He stopped, seemed to catch himself. I what? My voice was shaking now. You were his wife. That's important. I'm not saying it's not. But you didn't build Carter Dynamics. You don't get to show up now and pretend you have some authority over how it's run. The room tilted. This was what Vanessa had done. This was the story she'd fed him, carefully, over years. That I was nothing, had done nothing, was nothing but a widow living off a dead man's accomplishments. Daniel, I said carefully, who do you think owned the house we lived in when you were growing up? He blinked. Dad did. No, I did. I bought it with the money I made from my first startup before I ever met your father. Who do you think financed Carter Dynamics when we were starting out? Dad had investors, but the investors came later. In the beginning, it was my money, my savings, the equity I got from selling my company. I put every penny into Carter Dynamics because I believed in what we were building. Daniel was staring at me like I was speaking a foreign language. That's not, Vanessa said. What did Vanessa say? His mouth opened and closed. She said you and Dad had a traditional marriage, that he worked while you stayed home. I stayed home after you were born, I said. But I was still working, running operations, managing finances, making hiring decisions. I did that for 15 years, Daniel. I only stepped back from daily operations when your father got sick. Why didn't you ever tell me this? I tried. When you were younger, but you were more interested in what your father did, the technical side, the products, and that was fine. I understood. But somewhere along the way, you stopped asking about my role entirely. He shook his head slowly. This doesn't make sense. If you were so involved, why aren't you on the board? Why don't you have an office at the company? Because your father asked me not to. The words came out harder than I meant them to. Daniel went very still. What? I walked to the study and pulled out the file I'd been keeping, the one I'd sworn I wouldn't open until the time was right. I handed him Robert's letter. Daniel took it with trembling hands. I watched his eyes move across the page, reading his father's handwriting. The letter Robert had written 3 days before he died, explaining why he wanted me to step back. Why he wanted Daniel to earn his place at Carter Dynamics without knowing it was his inheritance. I don't understand, Daniel whispered when he finished. He wanted you to hide? He wanted you to be your own man, to succeed on your own merits. By lying to me? By not burdening you with expectations. I took a shaky breath. He thought if you knew the company was yours, that you'd inherit it eventually, you wouldn't push yourself, wouldn't strive for excellence, would just coast on the family name. So you've been pretending to be helpless for 5 years. I've been honoring your father's wishes. Daniel looked at the letter again, then at me. What changed? Why reveal yourself now? Because I realized his wishes were hurting you more than helping you. How? I gestured at the space between us. Look at us, Daniel. You just told me I was nothing but a housewife. You believe I've contributed nothing to your life except being married to your father. You're about to tank your career on a deal that would make any competent analyst run screaming, and you can't see it because you've surrounded yourself with people who tell you what you want to hear instead of what you need to know. People like who? Like Vanessa. His face hardened. Don't. She's manipulating you. Vanessa loves me. Does she? Or does she love what you represent? You don't know her. I know she convinced you to send your own mother to a retirement facility. Daniel's face went white. How did you That was a private conversation. She told me at the gala, right before she called me a parasite in front of 300 people. She was upset. She meant every word, Daniel. And the fact that you stood there and let her say it tells me everything I need to know about who you've become." He flinched like I'd hit him. "I was in shock," he said defensively. "It happened so fast I didn't know what to say. You could have said, 'Don't talk about my mother that way.' You could have said anything, but you said nothing. So you decided to get revenge by destroying my proposal? I decided to save you from yourself." "I don't need saving." "Yes, you do." My voice rose. "You're about to hand $40 million and control of half the company's international operations to a con man who's going to disappear. The second things go south. Adrian Cross has done this before, Daniel. He's a professional. He finds ambitious executives desperate to prove themselves, convinces them to push through aggressive expansion plans, collects his consulting fees, and vanishes before the whole thing collapses. You're wrong about him." "Am I?" "Then explain the offshore accounts." Daniel froze. "What offshore accounts?" I pulled out another file. Marcus's forensic accountant had worked fast. Adrian Cross has been moving money through shell companies in the Cayman Islands for the past 3 years. Money that matches exactly the consulting fees from his failed projects. He takes payment up front, delivers a plan that looks good on paper, and by the time anyone realizes it's garbage, he's already gone with the cash. I showed him the bank records, the corporate filings, the pattern that was impossible to miss once you knew what to look for. Daniel's hands were shaking as he read. "Where did you get this?" "I hired an investigator, same way I found out about his past projects." "That's illegal." "It's public record. Anyone could find it if they bothered to look." Vanessa and I looked. We did due diligence. "Did you? Or did you trust Adrian when he told you his credentials were solid?" Daniel set down the papers. His face had gone from angry to confused to something that looked like fear. He showed us case studies, success stories, references from executives who praised his work. "How many of those executives are still employed at the companies they were at when they hired him?" Silence. "Daniel, how many?" "I don't know," he admitted. "We contacted 2 of them. They gave positive reviews." "Let me guess. The reviews were general, lots of praise for Adrian's vision and innovative thinking, but nothing specific about actual results?" His silence was answer enough. I sat down heavily on the couch. "He's very good at what he does. I'll give him that. He finds smart people who are trying to prove something, and he gives them exactly what they want to hear. He makes them feel like they're visionaries, like they're the ones who finally understand his genius." "Why would he do that?" "Because he gets paid either way. Whether the project succeeds or fails doesn't matter to him. He collects his fees, builds his resume with fancy company names, and moves on before anyone connects the dots." Daniel sat down across from me. He looked smaller somehow, younger. "Vanessa believed in him," he said quietly. "She was the one who found him, said he was exactly what I needed to break through to the next level." "How did she find him?" "Some networking event. She said they got talking about emerging markets, and he mentioned he'd be interested in working with a company like Carter Dynamics." My stomach dropped. "He approached her." "I guess. Why?" "Because that's his pattern. He doesn't wait for companies to find him. He identifies targets and makes the approach look casual. Accidental." Daniel put his head in his hands. "I vouched for him. I told Morrison he was the real deal. I put my reputation on the line." "I know. If you're right about this, if he's really been playing me this whole time," he looked up, "the board will never trust me again." "They might, if you're the one who exposes him." "What?" I leaned forward. "You have all the documentation now. You know what to look for. Take it to Morrison. Show him what you found. Tell him you got suspicious after the board meeting and did a deeper dive." "That's lying." "No, it's taking credit for research that saved the company. Does it matter how you got the information?" "It matters that I didn't get it myself," Daniel said. "It matters that my mother had to step in and do my job for me." "Then do it now. Finish the investigation. Find the rest of what's there to find. Present it to the board as your work." "Why would you let me do that?" "Because you're my son," hung unspoken between us. "Because the company needs you," I said instead. "Because you're good at what you do when you're not being manipulated. And because I want you to succeed on your own merits." "The way Dad wanted." "Yes." Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then, "Why didn't he trust me? If he believed I was capable, Why hide everything? Why make you pretend to be someone you weren't? He did trust you. That's why he wanted you to prove yourself. He was afraid that if you knew you'd inherit the company, you'd never know if you actually earned your position or if people were just being nice to the boss's son. So instead, I spent my whole career thinking I had to fight twice as hard to live up to his legacy. Would you have fought as hard if you knew it was already yours? Daniel didn't answer. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 10. The sound was loud in the silence. I need to think, Daniel finally said, standing. This is a lot to process. I know. He walked to the door, then stopped. The gala, when Vanessa said those things, why didn't you defend yourself? I wanted to see if you would, and when I didn't, I realized the promise I made to your father was killing our relationship, that silence wasn't protecting you anymore. It was destroying us both. Daniel's eyes were wet. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I was shocked, and I froze. And by the time I found words, it was too late. But that's not an excuse. I should have defended you. Yes, I said, you should have. He nodded once, then left. I watched his car pull away, then locked the door and went back to the study. I felt hollowed out, exhausted, like I'd just run a marathon. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the Starbucks on Madison. Come alone. It was Vanessa. I should have ignored it, should have blocked the number and let Marcus handle any communication. Instead, I texted back, fine. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the conversation with Daniel, the way he'd looked when he read about Adrian, the confusion in his eyes when he realized how much I'd hidden, the fear that I'd waited too long to tell the truth. At 9:30 the next morning, I drove to the Starbucks Vanessa had specified. It was in a strip mall on the edge of town, the kind of anonymous location where you were unlikely to run into anyone you knew. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of her. She'd dressed down, jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer outfits. But her makeup was perfect and her hair was styled. Even in casual clothes, she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Evelyn? She gestured to the seat across from her. Thanks for coming. I sat, didn't touch the coffee she'd bought. You wanted to talk. I wanted to understand. Vanessa's voice was calm. Too calm. Like she'd rehearsed this. You're Daniel's mother, the woman who raised him. Why would you sabotage his career? I didn't sabotage anything. I stopped him from making a catastrophic mistake. By humiliating him in front of the board. By showing them the truth about Adrian Cross. Vanessa smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Adrian explained those projects to me. The failures weren't his fault. He was brought in too late to save companies that were already circling the drain. Is that what he told you? It's the truth. Then why are there offshore accounts full of money that matches his consulting fees? Her smile faltered, just for a second. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Daniel showed you the documentation last night, didn't he? Vanessa's jaw tightened. He showed me some papers his mother gave him. Papers from God knows where, obtained God knows how. Public record. Convenient that you found them right when you needed ammunition against Adrian. Convenient that Adrian found you right when Daniel was looking to make a name for himself. We stared at each other across the table. What do you want? Vanessa finally asked. Is this about money? Because if you're struggling financially, I'm not struggling financially. Then what? You want Daniel to choose between us? You want to punish me for the things I said at the gala? I want you to stop manipulating my son. Vanessa laughed. Actually laughed. Manipulating him? I'm his wife. I support his ambitions. I encourage him to reach for more instead of settling for comfortable mediocrity. You isolate him from anyone who might tell him the truth. I protect him from people who want to hold him back. People like his mother. People like a woman who pretends to be helpless while secretly controlling everything from the shadows. Vanessa leaned forward. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? You can't stand that Daniel doesn't need you anymore, that he has a wife and a career and a life that doesn't revolve around you. He needs me more now than ever. He just doesn't know it. Because you've made sure he doesn't know. You've hidden who you are, what you own, everything that might give him actual information to make decisions with. And then you blame me for the gap you created. The words hit harder than I expected because there was truth in them. I was honoring my husband's wishes, I said. Bullshit. You were playing games, testing Daniel to see if he'd live up to some impossible standard you and Robert set. And when he didn't, you decided to swoop in and save the day. It is exactly what happened. You let him struggle, let him fail, let him get involved with Adrian without saying a word. And then at the exact moment it would cause maximum damage, you revealed yourself and destroyed everything he'd built. I saved him from destroying himself. You destroyed his credibility. Morrison told him to take time off, Evelyn. They're talking about reassigning his projects. He might not recover from this. Good, I almost said. Let him fall and learn from it. But I couldn't say that, because the truth was messier. If he'd gone through with Adrian's proposal, I said quietly, he would have lost a lot more than credibility. He would have lost the company. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because I've been running companies since before you were born. I know what a disaster looks like. And Adrian's proposal was a 5-alarm fire. Vanessa sat back. You really believe you're the hero in this story? I don't think I'm a hero. I think I'm a mother trying to protect her son. From what? From me? From people who see him as a means to an end instead of a person. Like you've been doing? Vanessa's eyes glittered. Using him as a pawn in whatever game you're playing? Hiding behind dead husband's wishes so you don't have to admit you just like controlling things? You do. You absolutely do. Because if you really wanted to help Daniel, you would have told him the truth years ago. You would have given him the information he needed to make good decisions. Instead, you set him up to fail and then blamed everyone around him when he did. I felt something crack inside me. Get out, I said. We're in a public coffee shop. Then I'll leave. I stood. Vanessa grabbed my wrist. Sit down, we're not finished. I yanked my hand away. Don't touch me. The other customers were staring now. A barista was moving toward us uncertainly. Vanessa lowered her voice. I know what you own. Daniel told me everything last night, the shares, the properties, all of it. My blood went cold. And I know what you're planning, she continued. You want to push me out, convince Daniel I'm some villain while you're the wronged mother fighting for her son. You called me a parasite. I was angry. You were there when you shouldn't have been, and I lashed out. I'm sorry. The apology sounded rehearsed. Are you? Or are you just sorry I turned out to be more than you thought? Vanessa's mask slipped, just for a second, and underneath I saw something cold and calculating. Here's what's going to happen, she said. You're going to back off. You're going to stop interfering with Daniel's career. And you're going to let us live our lives without your constant hovering. Or what? Or I tell Daniel the truth about why you really revealed yourself. That this isn't about protecting him. It's about you being a lonely old woman who can't accept that her son has moved on. He'd never believe that. Are you sure? Because from where I'm sitting, you just spent 5 years lying to him. Why should he trust anything you say now? She had a point, and she knew it. You think you've won something, I said, but all you've done is show me exactly who you are. And who's that? Someone who married my son for his last name and his future. Someone who saw potential instead of a person. Vanessa stood, gathering her purse. Think what you want. But remember, Daniel chose me. He married me. He comes home to me every night. You're the one he visits out of obligation. She walked out, leaving me standing there with every eye in the coffee shop on me. I sat down heavily. My hands were shaking. The barista came over. Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone? I'm fine, I managed. Thank you. But I wasn't fine, because Vanessa was right about one thing. Daniel had chosen her. And no matter what I did, no matter what I revealed, that choice was his to unmake. I couldn't force him to see her clearly. I could only show him the truth and hope he had the strength to face it. I drove home in a fog. When I got there, Marcus was waiting on my porch. We have a problem, he said. What now? Adrian Cross filed a defamation suit against Margaret Vale this morning. Claims your accusations in the board meeting damaged his professional reputation and cost him future contracts. I stared at him. He's suing me? He's suing Margaret Vale, which is you, but he doesn't know that yet. I don't think. But if this goes to court, your identity will come out. Let it come out. Evelyn, I'm done hiding, Marcus. If Adrian wants to sue me, let him. Discovery will bury him. Marcus studied my face. What happened? I told him about the meeting with Vanessa, about Daniel's visit, about everything that had exploded in the past 24 hours. When I finished, Marcus was quiet for a long time. You're playing a dangerous game, he finally said. I'm not playing anything. I'm just trying to save my son. From his wife or from himself? Does it matter? It does if you lose him in the process. The words hung between us like smoke. Then I lose him, I said, but at least he'll be alive to hate me instead of destroyed by people who never cared about him at all. Marcus nodded slowly. All right, then let's make sure we win. He pulled out more files, more evidence against Adrian, corporate documents, financial records, email chains that showed exactly how Adrian had operated in his previous consulting gigs. We spent 3 hours going through everything, building a case, preparing for war. My phone rang around 4. Daniel. Mom, we need to talk. Can I come over? Of course. He arrived 20 minutes later with Vanessa. I hadn't expected her. They sat on my couch together, and I saw the way Daniel's hand rested on her knee, the way she leaned into him slightly. United front. My heart sank. Adrian's suing you, Daniel said without preamble. For defamation. I know. He wants a public apology and $2 million in damages. He's not getting either, Vanessa spoke up. Evelyn, this is serious. He has lawyers. If this goes to court, then it goes to court. I said nothing untrue. You damaged his reputation based on circumstantial evidence. I damaged his con game based on a clear pattern of fraud. Daniel rubbed his face. Mom, please, just apologize. Settle this quietly. If it becomes public, it'll reflect badly on the whole company. No. Why not? Because Adrian Cross is a predator, and I'm not going to let him intimidate me into silence so he can keep destroying people's careers. He's not, Vanessa started. He is. And deep down, both of you know it. You're just too invested in the lie to admit it. Daniel stood. I can't do this. I came here to ask you to be reasonable, and instead you're doubling down on conspiracy theories. They're not theories, they're documented facts. Then prove it, in court. Put your money where your mouth is. I intend to. He shook his head. Vanessa was right. This isn't about protecting me. This is about you needing to be in control. The accusation burned. If that's what you believe, I said quietly, then I can't stop you. No, you can't. They left together. Vanessa's hand on Daniel's back, guiding him, steering him, winning. I stood at the window and watched them drive away. And for the first time since this all started, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. If revealing the truth had done more damage than keeping the secret. If I'd lost my son trying to save him. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. You should have taken the settlement. Now things get ugly. A.C. Adrian. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I forwarded it to Marcus with 3 words. Game on. Marcus showed up at 7 the next morning with coffee and a grim expression. Adrian's lawyers filed the lawsuit publicly, he said, spreading papers across my kitchen table. It hit the business news an hour ago. They're painting you as a disgruntled investor who sabotaged a legitimate business deal out of personal vendetta. I scanned the headline on his tablet. Mystery investors' accusations derail major tech expansion. Lawsuit claims defamation. They move fast. That's the point. Get their narrative out first. Make you look like the aggressor. Marcus pulled up another article. And it gets worse. Someone leaked details about the board meeting to the press. Not everything, but enough to make you look unhinged. Let me guess, Adrian's team. Or someone close to him. Marcus gave me a meaningful look. Vanessa. Of course. My phone started buzzing. Texts from board members I barely knew, asking for clarification. Emails from business contacts I hadn't spoken to in years. Even a voicemail from James Morrison, his voice tight with stress. We need to discuss how this reflects on Carter Dynamics. Please, call me back immediately. I deleted it. They want you scared, Marcus said. They want you to fold before Discovery reveals what Adrian's really been doing. I'm not folding. Good. Because I have something. He pulled out a manila folder. My forensic accountant friend came through. Adrian Cross isn't just moving money through offshore accounts. He's been running a systematic scheme for 6 years. He targets mid-sized tech companies with ambitious executives, sells them expansion plans that look brilliant on paper, collects massive consulting fees up front, then disappears when the projects inevitably fail. How many companies? At least 8 we can prove. Probably more. Total damages in the range of $200 million. I felt sick. And he's still operating? He's careful, uses different business names, structures his contracts so there's always plausible deniability. By the time anyone realizes what happened, he's already moved to the next target. Daniel? Yes. But here's the thing. We found a connection. One of Adrian's previous marks was a guy named Richard Hale. Tech executive, late 30s, worked at a company called Innovex Systems. The name meant nothing to me. So? Richard Hale is Vanessa's brother. The kitchen tilted. What? Vanessa's maiden name is Hale. Richard Hale filed for bankruptcy 3 years ago after Innovex collapsed, following an expansion deal structured by Adrian Cross. Lost his house, his marriage, everything. I sat down hard. Vanessa knows Adrian from before. More than that. 6 months before she met Daniel, she was working as a consultant for the firm Adrian uses for his business development. It's all there in the employment records. She was working for him, or with him. We can't prove coordination yet, but the timeline is suspicious as hell. She starts working with Adrian's firm. 6 months later, she meets Daniel at a networking event. A year after that, she's married to him. And now, 3 years into the marriage, she's pushing him toward a business deal with Adrian Cross. My hands were shaking. This was planned from the beginning. It looks that way. Her brother lost everything to Adrian and she, what? Decided to help him do it again? Marcus shrugged. Maybe she blames her brother for the failure. Maybe Adrian convinced her the company's collapse wasn't his fault. Or maybe... He paused. Maybe she's getting a cut. Of the consulting fees? It would explain why she's been so invested in making this deal happen. Adrian's contract with Carter Dynamics is worth $5 million. If Vanessa's getting even 10%, that's $500,000. I felt nauseous. She married my son for a payout. We don't know that for certain, but we can find out. If there are payments going from Adrian to Vanessa, they'll leave a trail. How long? A week. Maybe 2. We don't have 2 weeks. The lawsuit moves forward in 3 days, and Daniel, my voice cracked. He's still defending her, still believing her story. Then we need to show him proof he can't deny. I thought about my son's face when he'd left yesterday. The way he'd looked at me like I was the problem, like I was the one tearing his life apart. He won't believe me, I said. Not without evidence, and maybe not even then. Marcus started packing up his files. There's something else you should know. Adrian's lawyers are pushing for an expedited hearing. They want this in front of a judge within the week. Why the rush? Because the longer this drags out, the more time we have to dig up dirt. Adrian wants to win fast and move on before anyone looks too closely at his background. What are our chances? Marcus was quiet for a moment. In court? 50-50. You made serious accusations in a semi-public forum. If we can't prove them conclusively, a judge might rule in Adrian's favor regardless of what we suspect. And if he wins, $2 million in damages, plus you'll be barred from making any further statements about him. And your reputation as Margaret Vale, and eventually as Evelyn Carter, will be destroyed. What about Carter Dynamics? The company survives either way. But Daniel's career might not. If you lose, the narrative becomes executive's unstable mother sabotages his biggest deal. He'll be tainted by association. So either way, I hurt my son. The realization settled over me like ash. I should never have stayed silent, I said. I should have told him the truth from the beginning. About the company, about me, about everything. You were honoring your husband's wishes. My husband was wrong. The words came out harsh. He thought he was protecting Daniel, but all he did was set him up to be vulnerable to people like Vanessa and Adrian. Because Daniel doesn't know his own worth. He thinks he has to prove himself to everyone, has to earn respect he should have had from the start. Marcus didn't argue. I spent the rest of that day preparing for war, going through every document Marcus had compiled, memorizing timelines, building the case that would either save my son or cost me everything I had left. That night I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, "You don't know the whole story." I almost deleted it. Probably spam or another threat from Adrian's team. But something made me open it. "Mrs. Carter, you don't know me, but I know you. Or at least, I know what you're trying to do. My name is Richard Hale. I'm Vanessa's older brother. I saw the lawsuit. I saw your name. And I need to tell you something. You're right about Adrian Cross. He destroyed my company. But what you don't know is that Vanessa helped him do it. I need to talk to you. Somewhere private. There are things you need to understand about my sister before this goes any further. Please, for your son's sake." The email ended with a phone number. I stared at it for 10 minutes, trying to decide if this was real or another trap. Then I called Marcus. "I need you to trace a phone number and find out everything you can about Richard Hale in the next 2 hours." By midnight, Marcus had confirmed that Richard Hale was real. Former executive at Innovex Systems. Bankruptcy filed 3 years ago, finalized 18 months later. Currently working as a mid-level manager at a software company in Portland. Clean record. No criminal history. No obvious connection to Adrian beyond the Innovex disaster. I called the number. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Carter?" "Mr. Hale. Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure you would." His voice was tired, defeated. "I know this sounds like a setup, but I swear I'm not working with Adrian or Vanessa. Not anymore. Tell me what you know." "Not over the phone. Can we meet tomorrow?" "Where are you?" "I can be wherever you need me to be. This is important enough that I'll take emergency leave from work." We agreed to meet at a diner 2 hours outside the city, neutral ground where neither of us had connections. I didn't tell Marcus where I was going, didn't tell anyone, just got in my car at 6 the next morning and drove. Richard Hale was waiting in a back booth when I arrived. He looked like his LinkedIn photo. Early 40s, thinning hair, the kind of face that had smiled more before life knocked it down. He stood when he saw me. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming." We shook hands. His grip was firm, but his palms were sweating. I sat across from him. "You said Vanessa helped Adrian destroy your company." "She did, but she didn't start out trying to. That's what makes it so twisted." He ordered coffee from a passing waitress, hands trembling slightly. "Vanessa and I were close growing up. She was the smart one, the ambitious one. I was just the brother trying to keep up." "When did that change?" "When she met Adrian. 7 years ago. She was working entry-level consulting, trying to break into the business world. Adrian was already established, running his scheme but doing it quietly enough that most people didn't notice. He recruited her to his firm, told her she had potential. And she believed him. Everyone believes Adrian. That's his gift. He makes you feel like you're special, like you see things other people miss." Richard's laugh was bitter. "Vanessa fell for it completely, started dating him, moved in with him, became his partner in every sense." I felt cold. "They were together? For 3 years she was in love with him, talked about marriage. But Adrian," Richard shook his head, "Adrian doesn't love anyone, he uses people. And when Vanessa started getting too serious, too invested, he cut her loose." "What happened?" "He moved to a new city, started working on a new target, told Vanessa it was over. She was devastated, spent 6 months trying to win him back before she finally accepted it was done. This was before she met Daniel, right before. She was still working at Adrian's firm, but in a different division. That's when Adrian approached her with a proposition." My coffee had gone cold. "What kind of proposition?" "He needed someone on the inside. Someone who could get close to a specific target and make the introduction look natural." Richard met my eyes. That target was Daniel. The diner noise faded to static. Adrian knew about Carter Dynamics, knew it was successful, growing, vulnerable to the right pitch. But he needed access, couldn't just cold call a company that size. So he asked Vanessa to make the connection. And she agreed. She still loved him. Thought if she did this, proved herself useful, he'd take her back. Richard's voice was hollow. She researched Daniel for months, learned his habits, his interests, figured out where he'd be. Then she arranged to accidentally meet him at a tech conference. I remember Daniel telling me about meeting Vanessa, how she'd been at the same panel discussion he'd attended, how they'd gotten talking afterward about market trends, how natural it had felt. It had all been choreographed. Did Adrian take her back? No, but he strung her along, kept her hoping, and Vanessa kept playing her part. Started dating Daniel, got serious with him, all while feeding information back to Adrian about the company, about Daniel's ambitions, about where he was vulnerable. And your company? Richard's face darkened. That was the test run. Adrian had already approached Innovex by the time he recruited Vanessa. I was the one pushing for expansion, convinced we needed to grow or die. Adrian sold me the same plan he's probably sold Daniel. Vanessa was supposed to stay neutral, just observe, learn how Adrian operated. But she didn't stay neutral. She saw me failing, and she didn't stop it, didn't warn me, just watched while Adrian's plan drove Innovex into the ground. His voice cracked. I lost everything, my job, my house. My wife left me because of the debt. And Vanessa. She came to the bankruptcy hearing, sat in the back, watched her own brother get destroyed. And the next week she went right back to working with Adrian. Why are you telling me this now? Because I saw the lawsuit, saw your name, and I realized Adrian's doing it again, which means Vanessa's doing it again, and I can't... He stopped, collected himself. I already lost my whole life to them. I can't watch them do it to someone else's family without at least trying to warn you. Does Vanessa know you're here? No, we haven't spoken in 2 years. Not since I told her exactly what I thought of her choices. Would you testify to this in court? Richard went very still. Against Vanessa. Against Adrian. But your testimony would implicate her too. He was quiet for a long time. The waitress refilled our coffee. A trucker paid his bill at the counter. Normal life continuing while my world rearranged itself. If I testify, Richard finally said, Vanessa will never forgive me. Whatever relationship we have left, even if it's just the possibility of one someday, it'll be gone. I know. But if I don't testify, she's going to help destroy your son the same way she helped destroy me. Yes. He rubbed his face. Can you prove the connection between her and Adrian? The payments, the coordination, any of it? We're working on it. Work faster. Because if you're going to blow up my sister's life, you better make sure it's for something that'll stick. He pulled out a flash drive. Everything I have is on here. Emails from when Vanessa and Adrian were together. Text messages where she talked about the project. Bank records showing payments from Adrian's firm to her account during the Innovex timeline. It's not conclusive proof of the Daniel situation, but it establishes the pattern. I took the flash drive. Why are you really doing this? Because Vanessa used to be a good person. Before Adrian got his hooks in her, she was the sister who helped me with homework, who called me when she was worried, who gave a damn about family. His eyes were wet. I want to believe there's still some part of that person left. And the only way to save her is to stop her from doing something she can't come back from. Stopping her means exposing her. I know. Richard stood, dropping cash on the table. But maybe that's what she needs. Maybe hitting bottom is the only way she'll ever climb back up. He left before I could respond. I sat there with the flash drive in my hand, thinking about Vanessa, about how she'd looked at Daniel, about whether any of it had been real or if it had all been performance from day one, about whether my son had ever been loved by the woman he married or if he'd just been a mark all along. I drove home and gave the flash drive to Marcus. He called me 4 hours later, voice tight with excitement. This is it. This is everything we need. Emails between Vanessa and Adrian going back 7 years, including one from 6 months before she met Daniel, where Adrian specifically mentions the Carter opportunity and asks if Vanessa's willing to do what's necessary. Can we use it in court? If Richard testifies to authenticate it, yes. But Evelyn, Marcus paused. If we enter this into evidence, it doesn't just damage Adrian's case. It destroys Vanessa. Daniel will know she's been lying to him from the beginning, that his entire marriage was built on fraud. He deserves to know the truth. Does he? Because sometimes the truth does more damage than the lie. I thought about that for a long time. About Daniel's face when he talked about Vanessa, the way he defended her, the way he'd chosen her over me again and again. If we don't tell him, I said slowly, and he finds out later that we knew and stayed quiet, he'll never trust either of us again. At least if we tell him now, we give him the chance to make an informed choice. He might choose her anyway. I know. Marcus sighed. All right, I'll prepare the evidence for submission, but you need to talk to Daniel first. Give him a chance to hear this from you before it becomes public record. I called Daniel that night. He didn't answer. I called again the next morning, straight to voicemail. I sent a text. I have information about Vanessa and Adrian you need to see. Please. No response. I drove to his house, the one he'd bought with Vanessa 2 years ago, in the neighborhood with the perfect lawns and the homeowners association rules about fence heights. I'd been there maybe 5 times. Never felt welcome. Vanessa answered the door. He doesn't want to see you, she said. Not hostile, just matter of fact. I need to talk to him. About what? More conspiracy theories about Adrian? More attempts to sabotage our lives? I have proof, Vanessa, real proof, about you and Adrian. Something flickered across her face, fear maybe, or calculation. I don't know what you think you have. Emails, bank records, testimony from your brother. She went very pale. Richard contacted you? He told me everything, about you and Adrian, about Innovex, about how you targeted Daniel. He's lying. Richard's been mentally unstable since the bankruptcy. Stop. My voice was harder than I'd intended. I'm giving you one chance to tell Daniel the truth yourself, before it comes out in court, before everyone knows. There's nothing to tell. Then you won't mind if I show him the evidence. Vanessa's mask cracked completely. You self-righteous bitch. You think you're saving him? You're destroying him. Daniel loves me. We have a life together, a future. And you're about to rip it all apart because you can't stand that he chose someone else. He didn't choose someone else. He chose a lie. The lie made him happy. The words hung between us, raw and honest. Is that what you tell yourself? I asked quietly. That lying to him was a kindness? I gave him everything he wanted. Confidence, ambition, a partner who believed in him. So what if it started as a job? It became real. I love him. Do you? Or do you love what he represents? Vanessa laughed, and it sounded broken. You want to know the truth? I don't know anymore. It's been so long since I could tell the difference. But I know this. I'm a better wife to him than you ever were a mother, because I actually let him be his own person instead of hovering over every decision, waiting for him to fail. The accusation stung because part of it was true. I stayed quiet to protect him, I said. No. You stayed quiet because it was easier than admitting your husband was wrong. That hiding the truth from Daniel didn't make him stronger. It made him desperate to prove himself to everyone. And that desperation is what made him vulnerable to people like Adrian. Like me. She was crying now. Actually crying. I didn't want this to happen, she whispered. I was supposed to make the introduction and walk away. But Daniel was kind and funny. And he looked at me like I mattered, and I thought maybe if I just kept playing the part long enough, I could become the person he thought I was. Vanessa, I know what you're going to do. Show him the emails. Prove I'm a fraud. Destroy my marriage so you can have your son back. She wiped her eyes, smearing mascara. But ask yourself this. When Daniel finds out the truth, when he knows his mother knew and told him anyway, is he going to thank you? Or is he going to hate you for taking away the one person who made him feel successful? Before I could answer, Daniel appeared behind her. What's going on? He looked between us, confused. Mom? Why are you here? Vanessa turned to him, her face a mess of tears and running makeup. Your mother has something to tell you about me and Adrian. Something she learned from my brother. Daniel's expression closed off. Richard? The guy who went bankrupt and tried to blame everyone but himself? Daniel? I started. No, I'm done with this. I'm done with you showing up making accusations based on information from unreliable sources. Richard Hale is a failure who's been bitter for years. Of course he'd say anything to make Adrian look bad. To make Vanessa look bad. The emails are real. The bank records are real. Or they're taken out of context, misinterpreted by someone with an agenda. Daniel put his arm around Vanessa. I know my wife. I know what we have together, and I'm not letting you poison it because you can't accept that I've moved on. Daniel, please, just look at the evidence. Get out. The words were quiet, final. Daniel, get out of my house and stop contacting me. Stop showing up. Stop trying to ruin my life because yours is empty. The words hit like bullets. Vanessa was crying against his shoulder. Daniel was holding her, protecting her. From me. I left, drove home in a fog, walked into my empty house, sat in Robert's study surrounded by photos of Daniel at every age. And for the first time since Robert died, I completely broke down. Because I'd been wrong about everything. I'd thought truth would set Daniel free. Thought proof would open his eyes. Thought love was enough to break through manipulation. But all I'd done was push him further into Vanessa's arms. Made her the victim and myself the villain. Given her exactly what she needed to cement her hold on him. My phone rang. Marcus. The hearing's been moved up, he said. Day after tomorrow. Adrian's team is pushing hard for a quick resolution. It doesn't matter. What? Daniel won't believe the evidence. I just tried to tell him, and he threw me out, called me bitter and empty, and... My voice broke. He's chosen her, Marcus. Completely. And nothing I say is going to change that. Then we make it public. Enter the evidence in court, force him to see it, and destroy what's left of my relationship with my son in the process. Marcus was quiet. What do you want to do? I thought about Daniel's face, about Vanessa's tears, about Richard's warning that sometimes the truth did more damage than the lie. I don't know, I admitted. I honestly don't know anymore. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every decision, every choice that had led to this moment, Robert asking me to stay silent, me agreeing, years of watching Daniel drift away, telling myself it was temporary. The gala, Vanessa's cruelty, Daniel's silence. Every step had seemed right at the time, protective, loving. But the road to losing my son had been paved with good intentions. At 3 a.m, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Emergency board meeting called for tomorrow, 9 a.m. Attendance mandatory. All shareholders must be present. James Morrison. All shareholders, including me. My heart started racing. Morrison knew. Somehow he'd figured out that Margaret Vale and Evelyn Carter were the same person, and he was forcing the issue. I called Marcus. Did you tell Morrison about my ownership stake? No, but someone might have. Adrian's lawyers would have been digging into Margaret Vale's background. If they found the connection, then it's all coming out tomorrow, in front of the entire board. Evelyn, we can fight this. Claim privacy, delay the meeting. No. I felt something settle inside me. A strange calm. Let it happen. Let them know. All of it. Are you sure? I'm tired of hiding. Tired of protecting Daniel from truth he needs to hear. If the board meeting forces everything into the open, then that's what happens. Daniel will be there. I know. I hung up and stood at my bedroom window, watching the sun start to rise. In 12 hours, my son would learn that his mother owned the company he'd spent his career trying to prove himself at. In 12 hours, the board would see evidence that his wife had targeted him from the beginning. In 12 hours, everything would explode. And I had no idea if any of us would survive the fallout. I arrived at Carter Dynamics at 8:30, dressed in the same business suit I'd worn as Margaret Vale. My hands were steady as I signed in at security, steady as I rode the elevator to the executive floor, steady as I walked toward the boardroom where my entire world was about to detonate. Marcus was waiting outside, looking pale. They know, he said quietly. Adrian's team found the connection last night. Filed an emergency motion to compel you to reveal your true identity in the defamation case. Morrison got a copy at 6 this morning. Is Daniel here yet? Not yet, but Vanessa is. She's in there with Adrian and his lawyers. Of course she was. I pushed open the boardroom door. The room went silent. 12 faces turned toward me. I recognized most of them. Patricia Chen, who I'd hired 6 years ago. Thomas Wright, who'd been with the company since Robert and I were running it out of our garage. James Morrison, looking like he hadn't slept. And there, in the corner, Vanessa and Adrian Cross sitting side by side like they owned the place. Adrian smiled when he saw me, cold, calculating. Ms. Vale? Or should I say Mrs. Carter? Morrison stood. Evelyn, I think you owe this board an explanation. I owe this board nothing, I said, taking a seat at the head of the table. Robert's old seat, the one that had sat empty for 5 years. But I'll give you one anyway. The door opened behind me. Daniel walked in, stopping short when he saw me. Mom, what are you doing here? Attending a board meeting, as is my right as majority shareholder. The color drained from his face. What? Your mother, Adrian said smoothly, has been hiding a rather significant conflict of interest. She owns 51% of Carter Dynamics, has for 28 years, and she's been playing corporate spy while pretending to be an outside investor. Daniel looked at Morrison. That's not possible. The majority shares are held in trust. Well, a trust managed by your mother, Morrison said quietly. I pulled the corporate records last night after Adrian's team filed their motion. It's all there, Daniel. Evelyn Carter founded this company with your father. She's been the primary shareholder the entire time. Daniel's eyes found mine. You own the company. Yes. You've owned it this whole time. Yes. And you never told me. Your father asked me not to. Don't bring Dad into this, his voice cracked. He's not here to defend himself. You're using him as an excuse for lying to me for 5 years. I was honoring his dying wish. Stop saying that. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. Stop hiding behind a dead man's wishes and admit the truth. You lied because you wanted control, because you couldn't stand the idea of me actually running this company without your permission. Vanessa put her hand on his arm. Daniel, please, let's just hear what she has to say. Her voice was gentle, soothing, playing the role of the supportive wife perfectly. I wanted to scream. Instead, I opened my briefcase and pulled out the files Marcus had prepared. You want the truth? I set the first folder in front of Morrison. Here's the truth. Adrian Cross has been running a systematic fraud operation for 6 years. He targets successful companies, sells them expansion plans that look brilliant but are designed to fail, collects his fees, and disappears before the damage is visible. Adrian's smile never wavered. These are the same baseless accusations she made before, all of which will be addressed in our lawsuit. They're not baseless. I opened the second folder. Richard Hale, former executive at Innovex Systems. Company collapsed after implementing Adrian's expansion strategy. Lost everything. One failed client proves nothing, Adrian said. Every consultant has projects that don't work out. Michael Torres, CEO of TechBridge Solutions. Bankruptcy within 18 months of hiring Adrian. Economic downturn. Sarah Kim, Meridian Global. Currently under federal investigation for securities fraud that started with Adrian's consulting contract. I kept pulling out files, spreading them across the table. 8 companies. 200 million in losses. All following the exact same pattern. Patricia Chen leaned forward, studying the documents. These are substantial allegations. With substantial proof, I handed her the forensic accounting report. Offshore accounts, shell companies, payments that match Adrian's consulting fees from companies that subsequently collapsed. Adrian stood. This is a witch hunt. Mrs. Carter is using corporate resources to pursue a personal vendetta because she can't accept that her son has outgrown her influence. Sit down, Mr. Cross. Morrison's voice was sharp. Let her finish. There's more. I pulled out the flash drive Richard had given me. Emails between Adrian Cross and Vanessa Hale, dating back 7 years, including correspondence from 6 months before Vanessa met Daniel, where Adrian specifically mentions the Carter opportunity. Vanessa went white. Daniel turned to look at her. What is she talking about? It's taken out of context. The context, I said, is that Vanessa worked for Adrian's consulting firm. She was his girlfriend for 3 years, and when he needed access to Carter Dynamics, he asked her to make the connection. That's a lie. Vanessa stood, her voice shaking. Daniel, she's making this up. My brother Richard is mentally unstable. He's been feeding her these insane stories. Your brother gave me bank records showing payments from Adrian's firm to your account during the Innovex timeline, texts where you discussed the project, emails where Adrian gave you specific instructions on how to approach Daniel. Let me see them. Daniel's voice was hollow. I plugged the flash drive into the boardroom's display system. Emails filled the screen. From a.cross@crossconsulting.com, 2v.hale@crossconsulting.com. The Carter opportunity looks promising. Daniel Carter fits the profile perfectly. Ambitious, hungry to prove himself, insecure about living up to his father's legacy. If you can make the approach seem natural, I think we have a real chance here. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Daniel stood slowly, walking toward the screen, reading the date. 6 months before he'd met Vanessa at that tech conference. "This is fake," Vanessa said desperately. "Richard doctored these. The next email appeared. From v.hale@crossconsulting.com to a.cross@crossconsulting.com. Met him today at the conference. He's sweet, a little awkward, talked about his father a lot. I think you're right about the insecurity angle. He'll be easy to manage." Daniel made a sound like he'd been punched. "Daniel," Vanessa reached for him. He stepped back. "Don't touch me." "It wasn't like that. Those emails are from when I first met you. I didn't know you yet. You targeted me. I did a job. Adrian asked me to make an introduction, and I did. But then I got to know you and everything changed." "When?" Daniel's voice was shaking. "When did it change, Vanessa? When did you stop pretending to love me and actually start?" "I love you now." "Now? Not on our wedding day? Not when you moved into my house? Just now when you got caught?" Adrian stood. "This is all very dramatic, but none of it is admissible in a court of law. These emails were obtained without proper authorization. They were given to me by Vanessa's brother," I said. "Who's willing to testify to their authenticity, along with testimony about how you convinced his sister to help you destroy his company?" Richard Hale is a disgruntled former client with an axe to grind. Oh, Richard Hale is a man whose life you destroyed while sleeping with his sister, who watched Vanessa choose you over her own family, who's been carrying this guilt for 3 years and finally decided to stop letting you hurt people. Morrison was reading through the forensic accounting report, his expression growing darker. "The offshore accounts, the timing of the payments. Adrian, this doesn't look good. It's circumstantial. It's a pattern." Patricia Chen held up another document. "I remember when you pitched us initially. You showed us case studies from successful expansions you'd managed. But according to this report, none of those companies are still operational. Market conditions change. Not like this. Not all at once. Not following the exact same trajectory." She looked at Morrison. "We need to suspend the expansion proposal pending a full investigation." "Agreed." Morrison turned to Adrian. "Your consulting contract is terminated effective immediately, and I'll be forwarding all of this to our legal team to determine if there are grounds for criminal charges." Adrian's mask finally cracked. "You're making a mistake. That expansion plan could have tripled your market value. It would have bankrupted us within 2 years," I said. "Just like it bankrupted Innovex. Just like you've bankrupted every company stupid enough to trust you." Adrian looked at me with pure hatred. "You think you've won something here? All you've done is destroy your son's marriage and his faith in you. He'll never forgive you for this." "Maybe not, but at least he'll still have a company to work for." Adrian gathered his files and walked toward the door. He stopped next to Daniel. "For what it's worth, she really did love you. By the end, she just loved the money more." Then he was gone. The room erupted in conversation, board members demanding answers, Morrison trying to establish order, Patricia Chen already on her phone with the company's lawyers. But I only saw Daniel. He was still staring at the screen where Vanessa's emails glowed like evidence of everything he'd believed was real. His face was gray, empty. Vanessa stood, gathering her purse with shaking hands. "Daniel, please, let me explain. Get out." His voice was barely a whisper. "Daniel, get out of this building. Get out of my house. Get out of my life." "You don't mean that." "I mean every word." He finally looked at her. "Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to keep lying until Adrian got what he wanted and you both disappeared with the money?" Vanessa's face crumpled. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was supposed to make an introduction and walk away. But then I met you, and you were so different from what I expected. You were kind, and you made me laugh, and you looked at me like I mattered for more than just what I could do for someone else. So you married me anyway. Kept lying, kept pretending." "I wasn't pretending. Not after the first year. Everything after that was real, I swear." "How am I supposed to believe anything you say?" Daniel's voice broke. "Our entire relationship is built on a lie. The way we met. The reason you stayed. All of it." "Not all of it. The wedding was real. Moving in together was real. The life we built..." The life you built to help Adrian steal from my family's company. I didn't know he was going to... Vanessa stopped. I thought he'd changed. He told me this was different, that Carter Dynamics was strong enough to handle the expansion, that he was doing this legitimately. And you believed him because you wanted to. Because even after everything he'd done to your brother, to all those other companies, you still chose him over me. I chose you. I married you, not him. You married my last name. You married the access I gave you to this company. You married the life you thought I could provide. Daniel's laugh was bitter. My mother was right. You never saw me. You just saw what I represented. Vanessa's tears were real now, mascara running, hands shaking. I did see you. I do see you. And I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm begging you. Please don't throw away 3 years because of how it started. People change. I changed. Did you? Because 2 days ago you were still pushing me toward Adrian's deal, still manipulating me, still lying. I thought it would work. I thought if the expansion succeeded, everything I'd done would be worth it. We'd be rich and successful, and you'd never have to know. That my wife was a fraud from day one? The words hung in the air like poison. Vanessa straightened, wiped her eyes. Something hardened in her expression. Fine. You want me to be the villain? I'll be the villain. She looked directly at me. But don't think for a second that you're the hero here. You lied to Daniel just as much as I did. For 5 years, you let him believe he was earning his place at a company that was already his. You let him struggle and doubt himself because it was easier than admitting your husband's dying wish was selfish and stupid. Don't you dare, I started. Why not? You've already destroyed my marriage. Might as well burn down the whole family. Vanessa turned back to Daniel. Your mother isn't protecting you. She's controlling you. She always has been. She just does it quietly, from the shadows, so you don't notice the strings. Get out, Daniel said again. This time Vanessa listened. She walked to the door, heels clicking on marble, then stopped. I did love you, she said without turning around. I know you don't believe me, but it's true, and I'm sorry for all of it. Then she was gone too. The boardroom had gone silent. Everyone was staring at Daniel. Morrison cleared his throat. Maybe we should take a break, reconvene in an hour. No. Daniel's voice was stronger now, harder. Let's finish this. Mom, you said you own 51% of the company. What exactly does that mean? I took a breath. It means I'm the majority shareholder. I have final say on all major corporate decisions. I can appoint and remove board members. I can approve or veto any significant expenditure. So everything I've done here, every promotion, every project, every accomplishment, you could have stopped it if you'd wanted to. I never wanted to stop you, but you could have. All of it was ultimately subject to your approval. In theory, yes, but not in theory. In practice. Every time Morrison or the board praised my work, they were really praising the majority shareholder's son. Every opportunity I got was because you allowed it. That's not true. You earned your position. How would I know? Daniel's eyes were wet. How would I ever know if I actually earned something or if it was just given to me because my mother owns the company? Every success is tainted. Every promotion is suspect. I spent my entire career trying to live up to Dad's legacy, and it turns out the whole time I was just playing in a sandbox you built. Your father wanted... I don't care what Dad wanted. The words exploded out of him. He's dead. He's been dead for 5 years, and you're still using him as a shield. Still making decisions based on what some dying man said instead of what your living son needed. The truth of it hit me like a slap. You're right, I said quietly. Your father was wrong, and I was wrong to follow his wishes instead of trusting you with the truth. Why didn't you? Daniel's voice cracked. Why couldn't you just tell me? We could have worked together, built something together. Instead, you let me flail around trying to prove myself to people who knew the whole time that I was the boss's son. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From knowing I mattered? From understanding that the company my father built was also my mother's legacy? From having the information I needed to make smart decisions about who to trust? He gestured at the empty doorway where Vanessa had been. If I'd known the truth from the beginning, maybe I would have seen through her. Maybe I would have questioned why a beautiful, successful woman was so interested in a guy who was still trying to prove himself. But I didn't know. And that ignorance made me vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation you were supposedly protecting me from. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. What? No. Daniel looked around the table. Everyone here knew, didn't they? About Mom being the real owner? Thomas Wright nodded slowly. Some of us. The ones who were around in the early days. And nobody thought to tell me. We were asked not to, Patricia Chen said quietly. Evelyn explained that Robert wanted you to earn your place without the pressure of knowing it was your inheritance. We respected that wish. So everyone was lying to me. My whole career is built on lies. I stood. Daniel, please. I need time. He backed toward the door. I need to think. About all of this. About whether I can even stay at a company where everyone sees me as the owner's son instead of as someone who earned his place. You did earn your place, Morrison said. Your work speaks for itself. Does it? Or have you all been grading me on a curve because you knew who my mother was? Nobody answered. Daniel looked at me one last time. I understand why Dad wanted me to succeed on my own. What I don't understand is why you thought lying was the way to make that happen. I was afraid, I admitted. Afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd see me differently, that you'd resent me for having power I never used to help you. Instead, I resent you for having power you used to deceive me. He walked out. The silence that followed was crushing. Morrison finally spoke. I think we should adjourn, give everyone time to process, reconvene next week to discuss next steps. The board members filed out, avoiding my eyes. Marcus appeared in the doorway. That went about as well as expected. He hates me. He's hurt. There's a difference. Is there? I sank into a chair. I destroyed his marriage, exposed his entire career as potentially fraudulent, admitted I've been lying to him for 5 years. At what point does hurt become hate? Marcus sat beside me. When he finds out Vanessa was planning to help Adrian drain the company's expansion fund into offshore accounts before disappearing. I looked at him. You found proof? My forensic accountant found the transfer authorization, drafted but not executed. $40 million routed through 3 shell companies, ending in an account jointly held by Adrian Cross and Vanessa Hale. They were going to steal everything and leave Daniel holding the bag. When the expansion failed and the money was gone, he'd have been the one who approved it all. His reputation would be destroyed, possibly criminal charges. I felt sick. We have to tell him. We will, but not today. Let him process the betrayal he already knows about. Adding more right now will just make him shut down completely. What do I do, Marcus? You wait, you give him space, and you hope that eventually he'll be ready to hear the whole truth. I drove home as the sun was setting, the same road I'd driven 1,000 times. But everything looked different now. Unfamiliar. Like I'd been gone for years instead of hours. My phone buzzed constantly. News alerts about the emergency board meeting, speculation about corporate shakeups, a statement from Adrian's lawyer claiming religious persecution and promising vigorous legal action. I ignored all of it. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in Robert's study, surrounded by photos of Daniel at every age. I tried to honor your wish, I said to the empty room. I tried to do it your way, and all I did was hurt him worse. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Carter? This is Patricia Chen. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to tell you something. What? Daniel's work here has always been legitimate. The promotions he received were based on merit. I've served on the review committees. His performance evaluations were conducted blind, without knowledge of who was being evaluated. He earned every advancement. Why are you telling me this? Because I was there when you and Robert built this company. I remember the fights you had about letting Daniel find his own way. I remember Robert insisting and you reluctantly agreeing, and I remember thinking at the time that you were both wrong. Wrong how? Robert wanted Daniel to succeed without help. You wanted to give him information, but what Daniel actually needed was partnership. To know that his parents had built something together and that he was being invited to continue that legacy. Not as an heir, as a partner. The words settled over me like snow. I failed him. You made a choice based on love and respect for your husband's wishes. That's not failure. It's just human. Patricia paused. Give Daniel time. He's angry now, but he's also his mother's son. Eventually, he'll remember that the woman who owns 51% of this company chose to stay silent for 5 years to protect his independence. That's not control. It's love. What if it's not enough? Then you live with that. But I don't think it'll come to that. Daniel's hurt, but he's not stupid. Once the shock wears off, he'll realize you saved him from something he couldn't see coming. And that matters. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about Daniel as a little boy, proudly showing me his drawings of Daddy's office. About the teenager who'd announced he wanted to study business so he could help run the company someday. About the young man at Robert's funeral who'd promised we'd get through everything together. About the stranger who'd stood in that boardroom today, looking at me like I was someone he'd never met. I'd spent 5 years trying to protect my son from the burden of inheritance, and in the process, I'd burdened him with something worse. The knowledge that the people who loved him most had decided he couldn't handle the truth. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Daniel. Just one word. Why? I stared at it for 5 minutes, trying to find an answer that made sense. Finally, I typed, "Because your father asked me to. And because I was a coward who chose a dead man's wishes over a living son's needs. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it, but I am so deeply sorry." The response came an hour later. "I need time." "Take all the time you need," I wrote back. But what I didn't say was that I was terrified time wouldn't be enough, that some betrayals were too deep to forgive, and that in trying to save my son, I might have lost him forever. 3 days passed without a word from Daniel. I didn't push, didn't call, didn't show up at his house or his office. I'd spent 5 years making decisions for him without his knowledge. The least I could do now was respect his request for space. But the silence was killing me. I threw myself into work instead, met with Morrison and the board to discuss restructuring, reviewed every contract Adrian had touched, looking for more damage, started the process of formally stepping into my role as majority shareholder instead of hiding behind proxies and silent votes. Marcus kept me updated on the legal fallout. Adrian's defamation lawsuit had been quietly withdrawn after his lawyers saw the evidence we'd compiled. The district attorney's office had opened an investigation into his consulting practices. 3 of his former clients had already filed civil suits, and Vanessa had disappeared. Her phone was disconnected. The house she'd shared with Daniel was empty, furniture and all. Her social media accounts were deleted. It was like she'd never existed. "She's good at disappearing," Marcus said when he told me. "Probably learned it from Adrian. Start over somewhere new with a new identity. Find a new mark." "What about the money, the offshore accounts?" "Frozen pending the investigation. She won't be able to touch them without exposing herself." Small comfort. Daniel's wife had tried to rob him blind and then vanished like smoke. Another betrayal on top of all the others. On the 4th day, Morrison called. "Daniel came in this morning, submitted his resignation." My heart stopped. "What?" "He says he can't work at a company his mother owns, that every day here would be a reminder that nothing he accomplished was truly his own." That's not true. I told him that, showed him his performance reviews, explained the blind evaluation process. He doesn't believe it. Where is he now? He left an hour ago, said he needed to figure out who he was without Carter Dynamics, without the company name, without any of it. I hung up and grabbed my keys. Daniel's house was 20 minutes away. I made it in 12, driving too fast, not caring about speed limits or stop signs or anything except getting to my son before he made another decision he couldn't undo. His car was in the driveway. I rang the doorbell, knocked, pounded when he didn't answer. "Daniel, I know you're in there. Please, just talk to me." Nothing. I sat down on his porch steps and waited. An hour passed. Then 2. The sun moved across the sky. Neighbors walked dogs, gave me curious looks, kept walking. I didn't move. Finally, as the sun was setting, the door opened behind me. "You're not going to leave, are you?" Daniel's voice was hoarse, tired. "No." He sighed and sat down beside me. We stared at his front lawn together. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing clothes he'd clearly slept in. The house smelled stale when the door had opened, like he hadn't been taking care of anything, including himself. "Morrison told you," he said. "Yes." "And you came to talk me out of it." "I came to listen. If you want to quit, that's your choice. but I need to understand why. Daniel laughed bitterly. You need to understand? You own 51% of the company, and you need to understand why I can't work there anymore. Yes. Because every time someone looks at me, they'll see the owner's son. Every project I touch will be questioned. Every success will be attributed to nepotism. I can't... His voice broke. I can't live like that. Always wondering if I actually earned something or if it was just given to me because of who my mother is. So you'll throw away 10 years of real work because you're afraid of what people might think? It's not about what they think. It's about what I know, that I've been operating on false pretenses this entire time. No, you've been operating on the pretenses your father set up, which I stupidly went along with. But your work was always yours, Daniel. The late nights, the strategies, the clients you landed, the deals you closed. I didn't do any of that. But you could have, at any point you could have stepped in and what? Taken over? Micromanaged? I didn't even attend board meetings for 5 years. I reviewed quarterly reports and voted by proxy. That's it. Because you were hiding. Yes, because I was honoring a promise I should have broken the day your father died. But that doesn't change the fact that you built your career with your own hands. Daniel was quiet. A car drove past, headlights cutting through the dusk. Vanessa's gone, he said suddenly. Took everything. Clothes, furniture, the wedding photos, all of it. I know. I'm sorry. Are you? Because you were right about her, about all of it. I don't take any pleasure in that. Don't you? You wanted her gone. You got what you wanted. The accusation stung because part of it was true. I had wanted Vanessa out of Daniel's life, but not like this. Not with him sitting on his porch looking broken. I wanted you safe, I said. I wanted you with someone who loved you for you, not for what you represented. But I never wanted you in pain. Too late. We sat in silence again. Somewhere down the street, kids were playing. Their laughter felt obscene against the heaviness between us. Marcus found something else, I said quietly. About Adrian and Vanessa. They had transfer authorizations ready to go. $40 million from the expansion fund, routed through shell companies to an offshore account in both their names. Daniel went very still. They were going to steal from the company? They were going to drain the expansion fund and disappear. Leave you holding the responsibility for a failed project and missing money. You'd have been ruined, possibly criminally charged. When were you planning to tell me this? When you were ready to hear it? I'm not sure I'll ever be ready to hear that my wife was planning to destroy my life. She already was destroying it, just slowly. This would have been the final blow. Daniel put his head in his hands. I loved her. I really loved her. I know. How could I have been so stupid? You saw through her immediately. Why couldn't I? Because you're not cynical. Because you believed the best of people. Because you wanted to be loved for who you are, not what you could provide. That's not stupidity. That's humanity. It feels like stupidity. It feels like betrayal. There's a difference. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. You've been betrayed too. By Dad. By me standing by while Vanessa humiliated you. By this whole mess. Your father didn't betray me. He made a choice I disagreed with, but he made it out of love, and I had to stop, collect myself. You were manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to play on your insecurities. That's not betrayal. That's being human. I should have defended you at the gala. That wasn't manipulation. That was cowardice. Yes, it was. He flinched at my honesty. But you're not a coward now, I continued. You're hurt and confused and trying to figure out what's real. And the fact that you're questioning everything instead of just accepting easy answers tells me you're stronger than you think. I don't feel strong. I feel like my whole life was a lie. Not all of it. Your father's love was real. My love is real. Your work was real. The only lies were the ones we told trying to protect you from knowledge you should have had from the beginning. Daniel leaned back against the porch railing. What happens now? To the company? That depends on you. How? If you resign, I'll respect that choice. But Carter Dynamics needs new leadership. Morrison's great as CEO, but we need a vision person. Someone who understands the technical side and the business side. Someone who can take what your father and I built and push it into the future. You want me to come back? I want you to make an informed decision. knowing all the facts, including the fact that you are genuinely qualified for this work, and that the company would be better with you than without you. As what? The owner's son who gets special treatment? As my partner. The word hung between us. Not as an employee, not as an heir, as an equal partner in running a company we both care about. Daniel stared at me. You'd give me half your shares? I'd restructure the ownership so we're co-majority shareholders, 49% each, the remaining 2% in a trust for future decisions requiring unanimous agreement. You'd have real power, real responsibility, real partnership. Why would you do that? Because your father was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about one. You needed to prove yourself, and you have. Not to me, not to the board, to yourself. You know now that you're capable, that you earned your place, so now I'm offering you a real choice. Not the shadow inheritance your father wanted, actual partnership. I don't know if I can trust you. The words were like a knife, but I'd earned them. Then don't. Not yet. Take the time you need. Figure out what you want. But don't throw away everything you've built because you're angry at me. That's letting me control your decisions just as much as hiding the ownership did. He was quiet for a long time. The streetlights came on. Crickets started their evening song. I need more time, he finally said. Okay. And I need you to actually let me have it. No showing up at my house, no emergency meetings, no manipulating things behind the scenes. I can do that. Can you? Because your track record isn't great. You're right, it's not. But I'm trying to do better. Daniel stood. I should go inside. I haven't eaten in 2 days and I think I'm starting to hallucinate from hunger. Daniel, I'm not ready to forgive you yet. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But I heard what you said about partnership, about choosing for myself. I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. He went inside without saying goodbye. The door closed with a soft click. I sat on his porch for another hour, watching the stars come out before driving home. 2 weeks crawled by. Marcus handled the legal aftermath. Adrian's consulting firm was dissolved. 3 states had opened investigations. The forensic accountant had traced the money through so many shell companies, it looked like a maze. The board approved my proposal to restructure the ownership, 49% for me, 49% for Daniel, 2% in trust. All of it documented and legal and waiting for Daniel to decide if he wanted it. I started going to the office again. Not hiding, not pretending to be someone else, just being Evelyn Carter, co-founder and majority shareholder. Some executives were surprised. Others acted like they'd known all along. A few avoided me, probably worried about how the power shift would affect their positions. I didn't care about any of it. I just wanted my son back. On day 16, my phone rang at 11 at night. Daniel, can you come over tomorrow? Morning, around 10. Of course. And Mom? He paused. Bring the partnership papers. I want to see what you're actually offering. Hope bloomed in my chest. Okay. I didn't sleep that night. Went over the papers 100 times, rehearsed what I'd say, imagined every possible outcome. At 9:30 the next morning, I drove to Daniel's house. He answered the door looking better. Shaved, dressed in clean clothes. The house behind him was tidier. Come in. We sat at his kitchen table. I spread out the partnership documents, explained every clause, every protection, every responsibility. Daniel read through everything twice, asked questions, made notes, acted like the competent executive I knew he was. Finally, he set down the pen. This is fair. More than fair. It gives me real control without making me responsible for decisions I didn't make. Yes. And you're willing to share power. Actually share it, not just pretend while keeping the real control behind the scenes. Yes. Why? You've had complete control for 28 years. Why give it up now? Because I'm tired of being alone in it. Because the company is too big for one person to run effectively. And because I had to stop, breathe. Because I want to work with my son, not for him or above him, with him. Daniel's eyes were wet. I'm still angry at you. I know. I still don't fully trust that you'll actually let go of control. I know that too. But I think... He stopped, started again. I think maybe we could try. The partnership. See if we can figure out how to work together without all the lies. I'd like that. I have conditions. Name them. Complete transparency. No more secrets. No more decisions made for my own good without my input. Agreed. If we disagree on something major, we hash it out. No silent treatments. No going behind each other's backs. We argue it out like adults. Agreed. And we go to therapy. Together, family therapy. Because this whole mess isn't getting fixed with one conversation and a legal contract. I blinked. You want to go to therapy? I've been going alone for the past 2 weeks. It's been helpful, but the therapist said we need to do some sessions together if we're going to rebuild trust. Then we'll do that. Daniel nodded slowly. Okay, then I'll sign, but I'm not moving back into the company right away. I need another month to clear my head, to figure out who I am outside of Carter Dynamics before I become a partner in running it. Take all the time you need. And when I come back as co-owner, not as the kid everyone remembers. I want my own office, my own projects, real responsibility. You'll have it. He picked up the pen, hesitated. If I sign this and it doesn't work out, if we can't figure out how to work together, what happens? We'll have a buyout clause. If either of us wants out, we can sell to the other at fair market value. No hard feelings, no corporate warfare. You'd let me buy you out? If that's what you wanted, though I hope it won't come to that. Daniel signed, then pushed the papers toward me. I signed too, making it real, making us partners. There's one more thing, I said. The company name. What about it? I want to change it to Carter and Vale Technologies, honoring both your parents, acknowledging that the company was built by 2 people, not just your father. Daniel's eyes widened. You want Dad's name to stay? He built this company with me. His vision, his technical genius, his drive. He deserves to be remembered. But Vale, that's your name. It was my name before I married your father. It's the name I used when we founded the company. The name on all the original incorporation papers. The name I've been hiding behind because I thought it was what your father wanted. I met Daniel's eyes. I'm done hiding, and I want the company to reflect the truth. That Carter Dynamics was built by 2 partners who loved each other and worked together to create something meaningful. Carter and Vale Technologies, Daniel said slowly, testing the sound. It's good. It's right. You'll propose it to the board? We'll propose it together, as partners. Something warm spread through my chest. Not quite forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of healing. Thank you, I said softly, for giving me another chance. Thank you for finally telling the truth, even though it hurt. Daniel stood. I should warn you, therapy's going to be rough. The therapist doesn't pull punches. She's already told me I have abandonment issues and control problems. What did she say about me? That you're so afraid of losing people that you try to control everything around them to keep them safe, which just pushes them away. I flinched. She's not wrong. No, she's really not. Daniel walked me to the door. One more thing about Vanessa. My stomach tightened. What about her? Marcus said she's gone. Disappeared completely. Yes. Part of me still loves her, or loves who I thought she was, and I hate that I feel that way. That's normal. Love doesn't just disappear because someone betrayed you. Did you love Dad less after you realized his dying wish was hurting me? The question caught me off guard. No, I loved him the same, but I was angry at him for not trusting me to make my own decisions about you, for thinking he knew better than I did what our son needed. Are you still angry? Sometimes. Usually at myself for not questioning him, for not trusting my own instincts. Daniel nodded. The therapist says that's healthy, that you can love someone and still be angry at them, that it's okay to hold both feelings at once. Your therapist sounds smart. She is. You'll like her, or you'll hate her, one of the two. He smiled, just a little, the first real smile I'd seen from him in weeks. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. We weren't fixed, weren't healed, but we were trying, and that was something. The following month moved slowly. Daniel stayed away from the office, working through whatever he needed to work through. We had our first therapy session, which was exactly as brutal as he'd warned. The therapist, Dr. Martinez, didn't let either of us hide behind excuses or justifications. She made us say the hard things out loud. Made me admit I'd used Robert's death as an excuse to avoid hard conversations. Made Daniel admit he'd been so desperate for his father's approval that he'd never questioned the narrative he'd been given about who built what. Made both of us acknowledge that we'd been so focused on protecting each other that we'd forgotten to actually talk to each other. By the end, we were both crying. But it was the good kind of crying, the kind that releases pressure instead of building it. We had 3 more sessions before Daniel was ready to come back to the office. The day he returned, I met him in the lobby at 8 in the morning. He was wearing a new suit, looking confident, ready. "You good?" I asked. "No, but I'm here anyway." We rode the elevator up together, stepped into the executive floor, heads turned, conversations paused. Morrison was waiting by the boardroom. "Welcome back, Daniel. Your office is ready?" "Actually," Daniel said, "I'd like to address everyone first, if that's okay." Morrison looked at me. I nodded. "Conference room's available." Word spread fast. Within 10 minutes, every senior executive was packed into the largest conference room, waiting, curious spot. Daniel stood at the front, took a breath. "Most of you know what happened last month, the board meeting, the revelations about my mother's ownership, my wife's betrayal, all of it." The room was silent. "I want to be clear about something. I resigned because I was angry and hurt and couldn't see past my own pride. But I'm back now because I've realized something important. This company doesn't belong to my mother or my father's memory or anyone's legacy. It belongs to all of us. Everyone who shows up and does the work and makes it successful." He gestured at me. "Evelyn Carter is the majority shareholder. That's a fact. But she's also been funding this company, protecting it, making hard decisions for nearly 3 decades. She deserves recognition for that. And starting today, she'll be getting it." Morrison started to applaud. Others joined in. Awkward at first, then genuine. Additionally, Daniel continued, the board has approved a name change. Effective immediately, this company will be known as Carter and Vale Technologies. Recognizing both founders, both parents, both partners in building something that's outlasted either of them individually. More applause. I felt tears prick my eyes. Finally, I'm returning not as senior executive Daniel Carter. I'm returning as co-majority shareholder. My mother and I will be running this company together, as partners, which means you'll all have 2 bosses to deal with instead of 1. Scattered laughter. Any questions? Patricia Chen raised her hand. Does this mean the expansion proposal is permanently dead? The Adrian Cross expansion proposal is dead, Daniel said. But we're developing a new international strategy, one based on actual market research instead of fantasy projections. My mother and I will be presenting it to the board next month. More questions followed, about reporting structures, about decision-making processes, about what partnership actually meant in practice. Daniel handled all of them with the confidence I'd always known he had. The confidence that had been there all along, just buried under insecurity and manipulation. When the meeting ended, people came up to congratulate us. Some seemed genuine. Others were clearly hedging their bets. A few still looked skeptical. I didn't care. My son was back, and we were finally on the same side. Over the next 2 months, we fell into a rhythm. Daniel took point on operations. I focused on finance and strategy. We met every morning to align on priorities, argued when we disagreed, compromised when we had to. It wasn't perfect. We had rough days, times when old patterns crept back in, times when I wanted to make decisions without consulting him, times when he wanted to prove himself by excluding me. But we kept showing up to therapy, kept talking, kept trying. The new expansion proposal was approved unanimously, a smart, measured approach to growth that wouldn't bankrupt us if it failed. Daniel presented it. I provided the financial analysis. Together, we answered the board's questions. It felt right. Adrian Cross was arrested 3 months after the board meeting. 7 counts of fraud, 4 counts of embezzlement. The district attorney said there were probably more victims they hadn't found yet. Vanessa was never found. Marcus suspected she'd left the country, started over somewhere with a new name. Maybe she'd find another Mark. Maybe she'd learned her lesson. I hoped for the latter, but expected the former. Daniel didn't talk about her much. Sometimes I'd catch him looking sad, and I knew he was thinking about what could have been if she'd been real. But mostly he focused on moving forward. 6 months after the partnership papers were signed, Daniel showed up at my house on a Sunday morning. "I have an idea," he said over coffee on my back porch, "for the company, but it's big, and I wanted to run it by you before I did anything official." "I'm listening." "What if we created a foundation, Carter and Vale Foundation, focused on helping small tech startups get funding and mentorship, specifically targeting founders who don't have family money or connections?" I set down my mug. "That's a beautiful idea. I keep thinking about how Dad wanted me to succeed on my own merit, and how that backfired because he didn't give me enough information. But the core idea was right. People should be able to succeed based on their work, not their connections. So we help level the playing field." "Exactly. We use some of our profits to fund people who might not otherwise get a chance, and we're honest about it. We tell them this is a leg up, that they're getting help, that there's no shame in needing support." "What would you need from me?" "Partnership, co-sign on the foundation, maybe serve on the board together." "I'm in." Daniel smiled. "I thought you might be. I've already drafted a proposal. Want to see it?" We spent the afternoon going through his plans. They were thorough, well-researched, smart. I was so proud I could barely speak. "What?" Daniel asked, noticing my expression. "You did this all yourself. Didn't ask for my input before you'd fully developed the idea. Trusted your own judgment." "Well, I learned from the best. Eventually." "You learned from making mistakes, from surviving betrayal, from being strong enough to rebuild after everything fell apart." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I'm still angry sometimes. About the lying, about Vanessa, about all of it." "You're allowed to be." "But I'm also grateful, because if none of that had happened, we wouldn't be here, partners, actually talking to each other, building something together." "So you've forgiven me?" "I'm working on it. The therapist says forgiveness is a process, not a destination." She's right. She usually is. It's annoying. We laughed. Real laughter. The kind that comes easy when the weight has finally lifted. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. The same sky I'd watched alone so many nights, wondering if I'd lost my son forever. "You know what I realized?" Daniel said suddenly. "The company name. Carter and Vale Technologies. It's perfect not because it honors you and Dad. It's perfect because it shows partnership. Two people building something together. Not one person taking credit. Not one person hiding in the shadows. Both of you. Visible. Equal. That's what I wanted. It's what we both deserved. What you deserved from the beginning." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "I love you, Mom. Even when I'm angry. Even when I don't trust you completely yet. I love you. I love you too. More than I can ever properly express." We sat like that as the sun disappeared below the horizon, mother and son, partners in business and in life, finally on the same page after years of miscommunication and pain. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We still had work to do, trust to rebuild, patterns to break, but it was real. And after everything we'd been through, real was enough. The woman they'd called a parasite had never been living off anyone. I'd been the foundation all along. The quiet strength holding everything together while everyone else took credit. But I was done being quiet, done hiding, done protecting people from truths they needed to hear. I was Evelyn Carter, co-founder of Carter and Vale Technologies. Mother, partner, fighter. And I was finally, after 63 years of putting everyone else first, learning to stand in the light. The company thrived. The foundation launched. Daniel and I presented our first joint strategic plan to shareholders, standing side by side at the podium, fielding questions as a team. And every single day, I made a choice. The choice to be visible, to speak up, to demand respect instead of waiting for it to be offered, to remember that love isn't about sacrifice until you disappear. It's about showing up, being honest, holding boundaries even when it hurts. It's about teaching the people you love that they're strong enough to handle the truth, and that you're strong enough to tell it, even when it costs you everything, especially then. Because the greatest gift I ever gave my son wasn't silence or protection or hiding the truth to shield him from burden. It was finally stepping into the light and showing him that partnership means standing together, visible, equal, real. And that was worth more than any inheritance, any protection, any well-meaning lie could ever be.